Ethan and I had a whirlwind romance, from our first meeting to getting our marriage certificate in less than a year. There wasn't much deep affection between us. He was the one who pursued me first, and he was also the first to grow distant. Even so, he arranged a grand engagement party, lavish beyond measure. All the prominent figures of City A attended, ostensibly to wish us a long and happy marriage, but in reality, they were using the event as a networking opportunity to seek personal gain. At this moment, standing opposite us was a beautiful woman in a white gown, tears welling up in her eyes, ready to fall at any moment.
Sophia.
I glanced at my fiancé beside me. His long fingers were turning white from the pressure, and his eyes were fixed solely on her. I smirked inwardly. In the year we had been together, Ethan had rarely looked at me with such intensity. Sometimes, he would suddenly stare at me, lost in thought, as if he were looking through me at someone else. Later, I realized this was indeed the case. Once, when he was drunk, he held me and kissed the mole on my nose, calling me Sophia in his delirium, a name that wasn't mine. Seeing this scene now, I understood everything. The true owner of that name had returned. I put on a gentle smile and intertwined my fingers with Ethan's.
Darling, is this your friend? Aren't you going to introduce us?
The girl opposite sniffled, forcing back her tears, and managed a not-so-pretty smile, with two shallow dimples at the corners of her mouth.
Hello, nice to meet you. I'm Sophia, Ethan's.
She's my friend, a friend I haven't seen in a long time.
I nodded. Such a clumsy attempt to cover up the truth was hardly clever. I handed Sophia a tissue.
Miss Sophia, you don't look well. Your eyes are red. Here, wipe them.
Sophia glared at me with her beautiful big eyes but didn't take the tissue, and I kept my hand extended. The scene became awkwardly tense. At that moment, a group of Ethan's friends noisily entered the hall. Leading the group was a man wearing gold-rimmed glasses and a tailored suit, exuding an air of sophistication. He was Ethan's best friend, Henry, the only son of Mr. Foster. They walked over, laughing and chatting, but froze when they saw Sophia, their faces filled with awkwardness.
What's wrong, everyone? Have you forgotten me after all this time? Henry, they might not recognize me, but surely you do.
To my surprise, the usually well-mannered Henry ignored her question and walked straight to me, taking the tissue from my hand. Sophia glared at me with her beautiful big eyes but didn't take the tissue. I kept my hand extended, and the scene became awkwardly tense.
Dan's friends noisily entered the hall. Leading the group was Henry, Dan's best friend, wearing gold-rimmed glasses and a tailored suit, exuding sophistication. They walked over, laughing and chatting, but froze when they saw Sophia, their faces filled with awkwardness.
What's wrong, everyone? Have you forgotten me after all this time? She smiled. Henry, they might not recognize me, but surely you do.
To my surprise, the usually well-mannered Henry ignored her question and walked straight to me, taking the tissue from my hand.
You've eaten too much. Wipe your mouth. He pursed his lips, casually tossed the tissue into the trash, and then turned to look at Sophia. My memory isn't great. Who are you again?
Sophia looked embarrassed, and Ethan's face darkened. The best way to ease the awkwardness was to leave the scene. I waved my hand and said, I'm a bit tired. I'll go rest. You all catch up. As soon as I stepped into the lounge, the smile I had been forcing immediately disappeared. Fake smiling all day is really exhausting. I stretched and couldn't help but complain, taking a big gulp of the bottled water on the table.
Turns out the bride isn't happy, a male voice suddenly said from behind. startling me so much that I almost spat out the water.
I turned around to see Henry leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, smiling at me with a hint of mischief.
You scared me, I patted my chest. Why didn't you knock?
He spread his hands in a helpless gesture. The door was open.
Given that he had helped me out today, I decided not to argue with his childish behavior and turned to tidy up the table.
As I packed my things into my bag, I asked him, is the event over? Why are you here?
No, he pulled a lollipop from his jacket pocket, unwrapped it, and popped it into his mouth. I hate these kinds of events. You're right, fake smiling is exhausting.
From the day I met Ethan, I noticed that his group of friends were just like him, typical rich kids. Though they had business acumen, they indulged in a life of luxury. Henry was the exception, always appearing refined and cultured, as if he came from a scholarly family. But after spending more time with him, I realized he was actually like a child, always having some quirky ideas. A year ago, when Ethan and I had just started dating, our friends either envied or blessed us. Only Henry found me and seriously advised me not to be with Ethan.
Ethan has a childhood friend who went abroad 3 years ago. She looks a lot like you. So no matter how much Ethan seems to love you, that love isn't real.
Looking at his slightly furrowed brows and serious eyes, I couldn't help but laugh. This guy was quite cute.
Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. I wasn't sure if I was comforting him or convincing myself.
I picked up my bag and walked towards the lounge door. From there, I could see the hall. Sophia was no longer the pitiful figure she had been earlier. She stood beside Ethan, engaging with the guests confidently. Whatever the guests said made Sophia laugh and pat Ethan's arm. It was as if she was the star of the day. My expression darkened a bit. Henry followed my gaze but couldn't tell if I was looking at Ethan or Sophia. By the time I saw off the last group of guests, it was already late at night. Turning around, I noticed one guest still hadn't left. Sophia stood at the doorway, the harsh light from the hall behind her making her smile appear even more triumphant. I stood at the bottom of the steps, looking up at her, with the endless darkness behind me.
Must have been exhausting today. Emily, you rarely attend such events, so it's understandable if you're not used to it.
I rolled my eyes internally.
I'm not used to it, but I understand it's just about saying the right things to the right people.
I walked up the steps, stepping into the light, facing Sophia, and looking into her familiar yet strange face.
So, Miss Sophia, what do you think I should say to you? Maybe I should throw you a tea party.
Sophia's smile visibly twitched. I smiled, sidestepping her, then paused.
By the way, Miss Sophia, have you noticed we look quite alike? It's quite a coincidence.
When I got home, Ethan was sitting at the dining table waiting for me, which was unusual. Since we started living together, Ethan often stayed out late, and even when he did come home, he went straight to the bedroom without talking to me. I pulled out a chair and sat down.
Ethan, why aren't you asleep yet? It's late.
Ethan stared at me.
Where did you go? Why did you come back later than me?
Oh, I was chatting with Miss Emily, so I left a bit late.
Hearing this, Ethan averted his eyes guiltily, remaining silent.
Ethan, if someone approached you, made you fall in love with them, and then you found out they were using you, what would you do?
Ethan's expression changed but quickly returned to normal. He stood up impatiently.
What nonsense are you thinking about? I'm going to bed.
Watching his back, a wave of bitterness surged in my heart. I knew that in his eyes, I was just a pawn. The first time I met Ethan was at a school sports event where he won first place in a long-distance race. I was working for the media club, responsible for taking photos of the winners. As the school's famous heartthrob, Ethan attracted a crowd of girls. He frowned at my camera, wanting to leave quickly.
Could you smile a bit, please?
Seeing me smile, Ethan seemed momentarily dazed. He walked up to me.
Smile again, just once more.
Because of that smile, I became the enemy of all the girls in school. If I were a well-off young lady, it might have been different, but being an ordinary girl made them even more resentful. When we first got together, Ethan often stood up for me against the criticism. His unprovoked gentleness and compliance almost made me believe I was his true love. Within 6 months, he started hinting at engagement, making me realize I was about to play the most crucial role as a pawn. Once this move was made, I would become expendable. The past didn't matter. I was just a stand-in. Those moments of affection were just Ethan seeking the feelings he had with Sophia. Once Sophia returned, everything would vanish. After the engagement was confirmed, Ethan's indifference became blatant. He no longer cared about me or my well-being. Now, in this game, Ethan had raised his pawn. But it didn't matter. The bitterness in my heart gradually faded, and I smiled slightly at the closed door. Ethan, you are just a puppet under my control. Every move is prearranged, I just need Ethan's hands to execute them. After the engagement party, the newspapers were filled with news about my upcoming marriage to Ethan. There were descriptions of the engagement party and speculations about the formal wedding. People seemed to find it hard to believe that the son of a business tycoon would marry a girl with no notable background. But the most sensational part of the newspaper was the headline, "The Real and Fake Fiancé." The accompanying photo showed Sophia and me talking at the entrance after the party. I was slightly turned, seemingly saying something to her with a smile on my face, while Sophia's eyes were wide open, her face flushed.
Emily, tone, murmuring even though it was taken secretly, it's quite clear.
I leaned back on the sofa and continued to read the article.
Emily, tone, murmuring, the woman who suddenly appeared at the engagement party is reportedly Ethan's childhood friend. What shocked everyone was that this woman looks remarkably similar to Ethan's fiancée, Miss Emily, sparking much speculation. Even more sensational, there have been multiple sightings of Ethan and Miss Emily.
I tossed the newspaper aside and glanced at my phone.
Emily, tone, hopeful the bait had been cast, now it was just a matter of who would bite first.
I had imagined the scene of talking with Emily and Ethan, but I never expected that the first person to come to me would be Henry. In the cafe, Henry spoke first.
Henry, tone, serious, did you see the news?
Emily, tone, feigning helplessness, I saw it. What a cliché plot, and it happened to me.
Henry, tone, angry, I warned you long ago, Ethan doesn't have much genuine affection for you. You're walking into a trap with your eyes wide open.
Henry's voice grew louder, drawing the attention of people around us. He took a deep breath, calming himself before continuing.
Henry, tone, serious, so what are you thinking? When are you planning to end things with him?
Emily, tone, serious, end things? Why should I? Things have already escalated. If Ethan really breaks off the engagement with me to marry Sophia, the rumors alone would drown them.
Henry, tone, shouting, do you love him that much? No, you don't love him, Emily. I've watched you for a year. Beneath the surface, it's not just Ethan who's acting. You don't have much genuine affection either. Truly loving someone means you can't ignore their indifference, but you don't care at all. Why continue this fake relationship? Why?
Seeing me remain silent, Henry grew visibly agitated. He stood up, leaned down, and looked into my eyes.
Henry, toned, hopeful. Tell me, Emily. Whatever Ethan can give you, I can give you too. You can tell me anything. I'll help you.
He gently shook my shoulders, but his grip was light, as if afraid of hurting me. Looking into his eyes, I felt a mix of emotions. I wasn't naive. In matters of the heart, I was more sensitive than anyone. How could I not understand his feelings?
Emily, tone, serious. Are you familiar with the Nan group?
Hearing my question, Henry sighed in relief and smiled. He sat back and thought for a moment.
Henry, tone, friendly. Sophia's father's company? I'm not that familiar, but her family has always collaborated with Ethan's family. That company has some skills. 20 years ago, it was a nobody. After merging with a competitor, it slowly grew. What was the name of that bankrupt company? I can't remember.
Emily, tone, serious. Starry.
Henry, tone, curious. That sounds right. It was so long ago. How do you know?
Emily, tone, serious. Have you met Sophia's mother?
Henry, tone, serious. I saw her once at a banquet. I heard she's Mr. Simmons' second wife, and Sophia is her child, right?
Emily, tone, serious. Yes. In fact, Sophia should call me sister.
Henry's eyes widened, and then he frowned.
Henry, tone, serious. You can't be much older than Sophia, so Mrs. Simmons.
His frown deepened, but he didn't continue. It's no wonder he was surprised. Anyone would find it absurd. My so-called mother, after giving birth to me, betrayed my father and, with her new partner, destroyed the business my father had painstakingly built. When I was 10, my father succumbed to illness, unable to afford treatment, leaving me alone in a loveless world. While I washed piles of dishes in the dim back kitchen of a restaurant, my mother enjoyed the spotlight with her second child. Seeing the news of the collaboration between the Ethan and Simmons families, and seeing Sophia's bright, sunny face, I felt a deep-seated resentment for my own birthmarks and dimples for the first time. Later, I got into the same university as them. To avoid attention, I chose a different campus and major. They studied business, while I pursued applied psychology. Eventually, I learned that Sophia went abroad. That's when I knew this face would finally come in handy. I joined the media organization and got a spot as a photographer at the sports event. That morning, I used eyeliner to darken the birthmark on the side of my nose. When I put down the camera, I gave Ethan a perfect smile, dimples appearing on both sides of my mouth. In this way, I used invisible threads to pull Ethan into my game.
So, what's your ultimate goal? What do you plan to do?
I was slightly surprised.
You really want to help me?
I had nothing to lose, but Henry was different. He was like a sunflower, meant to stay in the light, not step into the darkness.
Why not? I think you're brave, carrying so much on your own. But from now on, you're not alone. I'm willing to be your pawn, until the end.
Opening the door, the smell of alcohol filled the room. Ethan was sprawled on the sofa, completely inebriated. I hated his drunken state the most. His affectionate eyes always reflected someone else's image, and his murmurs were always someone else's name.
Ethan. Ethan, get up. You've had too much to drink.
I pushed against his chest, but it was futile.
Where did you go today? Who did you see?
Though it was a question, his tone suggested he already knew the answer. I couldn't be sure, so I tried to change the subject.
I didn't do anything. Just get up. Why did you drink so much?
Ethan hung his head in silence. Just as I began to wonder if he had fallen asleep, he quietly said,
I know you went to see Henry.
So, he had been watching me. With the news in the papers, any slight movement could affect the stock prices. Even if Ethan didn't contact me immediately, he would still keep me under his watch.
He saw the news and asked about it.
I saw him pat your head.
The room fell into a heavy silence, neither of us speaking.
You've had too much to drink. Stop overthinking. Let me help you to bed.
It took all my effort to get the 6-foot-tall Ethan onto the bed. My back felt like it was about to break, and he still wouldn't let go of my hand. With no other choice, I collapsed onto the bed as well. Exhausted from the day's events, I was on the verge of falling asleep.
Emily, I've really fallen for you.
At dawn, I was jolted awake by a nightmare. In the dream, I was a child with a happy family, the three of us strolling joyfully at sunset. But suddenly, the sun vanished and darkness enveloped me. All I could hear were the fading clicks of high heels and the piercing sirens of an ambulance. Panicked, I reached out blindly for my parents' hands, but all I grasped was empty air. The repressed emotions burst forth, and I crouched down, crying uncontrollably, shouting for them not to leave me alone. A hand broke through the darkness and reached out to me. I looked up and, through my tears, saw a boy with a small, endearing tooth. He pulled me out of the darkness with a firm grip. In the dream, the boy, about 10 years old, wore gold-rimmed glasses and handed me a lollipop from his pocket.
Eat this, and you won't cry.
Sophia glared at me with her beautiful big eyes but didn't take the tissue. I kept my hand extended, and the scene became awkwardly tense.
That moment, a group of Ethan's friends noisily entered the hall. Leading the group was Henry, Ethan's best friend, wearing gold-rimmed glasses and a tailored suit, exuding sophistication. They walked over, laughing and chatting, but froze when they saw Sophia, their faces filled with awkwardness.
What's wrong, everyone? Have you forgotten me after all this time? Henry, they might not recognize me, but surely you do.
To my surprise, the usually well-mannered Henry ignored her question and walked straight to me, taking the tissue from my hand. Sophia glared at me with her beautiful big eyes but didn't take the tissue. I kept my hand extended, and the scene became awkwardly tense. At that moment, a group of Ethan's friends noisily entered the hall. Leading the group was a man wearing gold-rimmed glasses and a tailored suit, exuding an air of sophistication. He was Ethan's best friend, Henry, the only son of Mr. Foster. They walked over, laughing and chatting, but froze when they saw Sophia, their faces filled with awkwardness.
What's wrong, everyone? Have you forgotten me after all this time?
Sophia smiled and turned to Henry.
Henry, they might not recognize me, but surely you do.
To my surprise, the usually well-mannered Henry ignored her question and walked straight to me, taking the tissue from my hand. The day Ethan's company officially announced the termination of all collaborations with Nan Group, the entire business world was abuzz. Everyone speculated about the hidden opportunities, and many dug into Nan Group's past scandals, uncovering tax evasion, falsified accounts, and malicious monopolies, causing an even bigger uproar. Nan Group collapsed completely, and Simmons Corporation declared bankruptcy. The day the court sealed the Simmons residence, I stood across the street watching. The grand entrance was sealed, and Sophia and her mother, wearing sunglasses and masks, stood by the roadside with 2 suitcases, trying to hail a cab. For a moment, I felt like I was seeing a reflection of myself and my father from over a decade ago, when we lost everything overnight. The wheel of fortune had turned, and finally, the wrongdoers faced their consequences. I walked towards them, and Sophia noticed me first.
Emily! It's all your fault. You wretched person.
Sophia, it was your own foolishness. Many things were your mistakes from the beginning. Remember that newspaper with the fake fiancé story? That's when Nan's stock started to fall, and you had to keep turning to Ethan, making Nan increasingly dependent on his family. That photo of us talking could have caused such a stir because I bribed the editor to sensationalize it. It was just a trick to grab attention.
She lunged at me in a frenzy, but the woman beside her held her back.
Are you Emily? What are you doing here?
Just here to see you off. After all, we share the same blood.
What nonsense are you talking about?
The woman beside her suddenly changed her expression. She half opened her mouth but couldn't utter a word.
Yes, I'm Anna. Mom, how have you been? Did you think I had long since disappeared?
The woman's face turned ashen, and she staggered back, losing her balance and collapsing to the ground. Sophia hurried over to help her up. I hadn't mentioned the name Anna in a long time. The last time I thought of it was when Ethan first held me and called me, and I mistook Nyen Nyen for Nyen Nyen. I took a few steps forward, looking down at them. This woman had one thing right: the old Anna had indeed died, in that cold, dark fire escape at the age of 10. The one who survived was Emily, saved by a lollipop and a warm light. Emily, the beginning. When everything finally settled, I let out a long sigh of relief. The meticulous planning of over a decade had finally come to an end. I agreed to go south with Henry to start a new life, but before that, there was someone I needed to see. I had only been to Ethan's office twice, so I wasn't very familiar with it, but I managed to find it based on my memory. I knocked on the door and heard a hoarse and tired voice say,
Come in.
Pushing the door open, I was greeted by a mountain of documents. Ethan looked up at the sound, and seemed a bit stunned to see me.
Henry told me everything. I thought you had already left.
I shook my head slightly. Before I leave, I need to settle some old matters. Ethan was silent for a moment, then said,
About Sophia, I owe you an apology. But I truly didn't see you as a substitute afterward.
Ethan, you used me to find the person in your memories, and I used you to get my revenge. We're even now.
I'm sorry for disrupting your life, though it wasn't my intention.
Let's forget the past and live well in the future. In any game, there are winners and losers. Even the winner has to sacrifice some pieces along the way, all for the final outcome. I spent 10 years setting up this game, risking everything I had, and fortunately, I won. As the smoke cleared, only clarity remained.